It's been 102 days since the October 7th attack in Israel that launched that nation into a war against Hamas. And as we speak, over 130 hostages remain in Gaza. Rabbi Michael Wolk from Temple Israel just returned from a trip to Israel with a Rabbinic Solidarity Coalition where he saw the sites of those October 7th attacks. You're looking at some of the images right now. He joins us now live. And Rabbi, first, good morning, and thank you for taking the time to sit down with us.
Good morning, Julian. Thank you for having me.
I want to start with your trip to the sites of the attacks at the kibbutz. One, what was the emotion like for the people who have been displaced from there, and what was that like for you?
I think Israelis are an absolutely incredible people. I saw things that would have absolutely devastated me, would have destroyed me. If I had lost people I knew right in front of my own eyes, seen my home destroyed, blown up, I don't know how I would get up in the morning. But Israelis are such an incredibly resilient people. They've pulled together, they've rallied around each other, they support each other through private organizations and through public means. And they're just an incredible country. They're able to get up each morning to go about their lives, even when they are pulled away from their homes. We spoke to people who were evacuated from the areas around Gaza who've been living in hotels for months. And there's something almost humorous or inspiring about seeing a luxury hotel in Jerusalem filled with little kids wearing their backpacks going to school. Instead of tourists who are there. And the hotels took them in, and they are learning to go about their lives, even while they grieve, even while they mourn, even while they're scared.
You know, we have limited time on the news to cover these topics each and every day, but one of the things that we don't get to talk about as much is how did this happen, and the sentiment by Israelis. How do they feel about everything? Again, over 100 days out from this now. Is there any answers as to how this was able to happen?
All of the Israelis that we spoke to from across the political spectrum, and they have a wide political spectrum in Israel and very divisive politics, all of them feel that they were failed by their government on October 7th in the lead up to that day. The government promised to protect them from Hamas, and they feel that they were let down, that the government was not prepared and the army was not prepared. But that said, one of the other incredible parts about Israeli society is that they're willing to put that aside for now. They recognize that there's an ongoing threat from Hamas as a neighbor, and they are willing to let their government and their leaders fight this war. But when this immediate war is over, most of the journalists that we spoke to and the people on the street feel that there's going to be political turmoil, political change in Israel.
And obviously there has been very strong viewpoints on both sides of the war. What is the sentiment? What are the thoughts from Israelis about what's going on in Gaza?
Israelis, one of the other things that they all agree about is that Hamas has ruled Gaza for almost 20 years. It was elected. There's been one election in almost 20 years because after that election, Hamas threw out, imprisoned, or murdered anyone who stood against them. And since that time, they've launched rocket attacks at Israel. They've been a low-level threat to Israel. But October 7th took that to a whole new level, and it brought home to Israelis why Hamas cannot continue to rule this territory that is right next to Israel. Israelis across the political spectrum feel that Hamas's ability to launch another attack needs to be taken out.
And Rabbi, going to the kibbutz there, the question, what comes next for these areas? You mentioned they want to keep some of the sites intact almost as a remembrance for what happened.
So I think that if you ask different people, they'll give you different answers. We visited kibbutz Kfar Atza, which is a kibbutz that's been around for almost 70 years, outside of the Gaza area. And we talked to someone whose family had been there for 4 generations, who's really deeply attached to this area. And he survived, thankfully, October 7th. His immediate family survived October 7th. And he doesn't believe that he can ever bring his children back to this place where they grew up, where his family has put down roots over multiple generations. On the other hand, a military commander from the region who we spoke to said that ultimate goal is to be able to bring civilians back to their homes. And it was interesting to see this discussion between the two of them that they put on the spot in front of us about what the future of this area is going to be. And I think ultimately we don't know. Some people will want to return out of a sense of connection, out of a sense of resilience. And some people will say, there's been too much tragedy here. We need to start over in a new part of the country.
And you mentioned return. We know that there are still over 130 hostages being held in Gaza. You went to the Shabbat table that they had with all the empty seats to try to remember the people over there. I imagine it is a constant push for the Israeli government by the Israeli citizens to try to bring these hostages back alive.
Their faces are everywhere. There are signs up all across the country featuring the faces of these 100-something hostages who remain in Gaza, whose fate is unknown. And we continue to pray for them, and the military continues to search for them. And that is one of the top goals of the military, is to bring these people home, as many of them as they possibly can safely. But it's getting harder to feel optimism as more time passes.
As far as your visit there, thoughts going into it now, coming back home, did it change anything? Was there something that you saw that maybe you didn't expect to see?
Say, when you learn Jewish history, you hear the word pogrom tossed around a lot. Pogrom is a riot. Pogrom is a massacre that Jews in Europe were subjected to when the Cossacks or whoever it was would come into the village and destroy Jewish buildings, burn them down, attack Jews, steal from them. And to see the after effects of one in person is something that I could not have imagined. You've been showing some of the pictures of Kibbutz Kfar Aza, but the level of destruction and the level of death and pain and suffering is something that most people don't have, thank God, don't have the opportunity to see during their lives. And it reminds me of the importance of what Israel is doing in limiting Hamas's ability and taking out Hamas's ability to launch further attacks like this.